If you've ever tried to talk energy with someone who's already made up their mind, this episode will give you a better way to do it. Welcome to Project Vanguard Podcast, home of the community of veterans in energy, where we explore the journeys of veterans leading in energy. We're building American energy dominance through an all-the-above approach, where energy security is national security. And our mission is to double the number of veterans working in the energy industry. I'm your host, Kevin Doffing. Today's guest is John Szoka, a West Point graduate, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and Airborne Ranger who later served a decade in the North Carolina State Legislature. Today, he leads the Conservative Energy Network, a 501c3 nonprofit working across 26 states to educate lawmakers and cut through the misinformation and disinformation that keeps good energy policy stuck. We dig into what John calls the real fight, not right versus left, but facts versus noise. We talk about how bad narratives spread and why the best way to change minds is not a fact sheet, it's listening first. We also get into the operator side of energy, how transmission matters, manufacturing matters, how siting matters. Every form of energy is subsidized in America. So the question becomes, what kind of policy creates predictability without driving an industry off a cliff? John has lived that shift himself, going from skeptic to champion on solar after doing the work and passing major legislation in North Carolina. You'll walk away with a practical way to communicate energy without triggering folks in the room, plus a clear view of why veterans belong in these conversations, whether it's in the industry or running for office. Let's get into it. Well, John, thanks for joining us today.
Well, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here.
I've been excited about this. You're one of the first folks that we've been able to both talk into coming on to the advisory board for Project Vanguard and jump on this little podcast. So I appreciate you taking two leaps of faith with us.
Absolutely.
How's the new year kicking off? We're recording this now, first week of January 2026. What does the new year look like for you?
Well, for energy, it's going to be an interesting year. I can tell you that. I think we had enough bad news in 2025. So for me, the glass is always half full. I'm looking for good news this year, not more bad news.
Yeah, no, I know right before Christmas, the stop order on all the offshore wind, I got pinged on that from some friends at Orsted and then flipped it over to a buddy that was at the DoD when they wrote those rules. And his assessment was not that cheery because he's like, this has no basis. We're fine. Like, this is a nothing.
And that's what I believe too. When I was well, your listeners might not know, but I served in the North Carolina State Legislature for 10 years from January 1st of 2013 through the end of 22. And was the Amazon wind farm, is what we call it, built by Avangrid in northeastern North Carolina. And there was a radar station up there, and we got all into it. I mean, really down in the weeds. And the bottom line was, it's a math problem.
Yeah, it's a software patch.
Yeah, if you know where things are, you get a bunch of smart people who work on the software, and it fixes it. It's not like a nation-ending event. So
Right.
I'm not really sure actually, I think I am sure where this came from, but we can maybe talk about that later, or maybe not talk about it at all. I don't know.
I mean, it's got to be talked about, but this kind of comes back to why we wanted to have you on here. I was really blown away by what the Conservative Energy Network has done working with Matt Welch here in Texas. And for full transparency, I'm on the advisory board for Conservative Texans for Energy Innovation, the Texas chapter for Conservative Energy Network. Can you just introduce Conservative Energy Network to everybody if they don't already know about it, which they should, but might not?
Well, I would hope they do, but in the real world, they may not. Conservative Energy Network is a network of several organizations. We have some that are all employees, and we're represented in 26 states. As you mentioned, in Texas, it's Conservative Texas for Energy Innovation. In the Mountain West, which takes from the Great Plains, not all the way to the Pacific, take out the 3 Pacific states, but that's represented by a group called the Western Way. And in the Southeast, we have Conservatives for Clean Energy. So all in all, it's 26 states. So what's that mean? In these states, we work with state legislators and legislatures to educate them. We're a 501c3, and we're all things energy. whether we're talking about nukes, solar, wind, fusion, battery storage, any combination of all the above, none of the above, geothermal. We tell mainly conservative elected officials at the state level, and sometimes we go down to county levels as well. And we also hit members of Congress and US senators to combat the misinformation and the absolute disinformation that's floating around out there. For example, offshore wind kills whales. No, it doesn't. There's no scientific basis for that. Somebody said that one time, other people pick it up. Solar kills birds by reflecting sunshine back up into the air and they drop dead. No, it doesn't. Those are some of the more extreme things we deal with.
Yeah.
So we do education. 26 states, we have about 100 people working across the country.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I was just having this talk with somebody in our organization about how big circles, small squares. Like when I introduce myself at a kids event, it's, hey, I work in the veteran space. I help vets get jobs. Oh, what kind of jobs? Oh, in energy. Okay, what kind of energy jobs? Predominantly, it's inside of renewables. I'm in Houston, grew up in oil and gas, so still do some of that, but mostly inside the space we're talking about. I find most people either don't know, don't care, or don't have really harsh opinions. But when you do run into someone with like a very negative opinion, like they have a very entrenched negative opinion, how do you gauge that from I don't know, I don't care, I'm easily like educated to I'm entrenched?
That's a good question. How long do I have for this
Oh, we got as long as we got.
conversation?
We got all day.
What you frequently find is the further someone is from an energy generation source, whether it's a coal plant or a nuclear plant or a solar field, the less hard of feelings they have, hard set feelings they have, the closer you get to where something is established or it's going to be built.
Huh.
It's like all of a sudden they get, oh, I know all this and it's really bad or it's really good. There's not too many opinions there that are like middle of the road. So, like in siting solar and onshore wind and even battery, well, in siting anything really, there's in my own community here, I live in Cumberland County, North Carolina. Somebody wants to put in an AI data center, and all of a sudden the NIMBYs are coming up. It uses too much water, it's too loud, it does this. Did you know that? People just don't like what they don't understand. And it's not just related to energy either. I think when people don't understand something, they grab onto something that they hear that they trust, even if it's some crazy stuff off the internet. It's like, I now believe this good, bad, and different. And the problem with education is first you got to listen to people and let them kind of like let the air out of the balloon, so to speak. Then you can be like, well, that's interesting, but did you know, were you aware of, or that's not quite right. You don't want to get into one of these, I call it the Star Trek modes, which I might be dating myself, but Captain Kirk and the Starship Enterprise, you see the Klingons come up and it's like shields up, and then they start firing back and forth. If the first thing you do is put your shields up to defend whatever your position is, you've already lost. You're
Yeah.
not going to educate anybody. People want to be acknowledged that they know something, even if it's 100% wrong. So acknowledge that they know it, and then you can have a conversation rather than shields up and 100 strength phasers shooting back. So I'm not sure I really answered the question, but that's
No, I mean, like that's what we run through, right?
yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the important things with both of our groups, Project Vanguard and CEN, is if it's just the same people talking about it in the same way, it doesn't work. But we also got to come in at the right times and in the right ways to talk about it. I always hear a lot about message and messengers, but it's also like, how
Mm,
do you message, right? Like, are you coming up
it is.
over a beer at the VFW and just talking and BSing and probably saying something inappropriate, but then laying down some, pretty defensible common sense facts? Or are you just sliding a fact sheet across at a resource booth and it's like, okay, cool. I don't even walk by resource booths, so I'm not even going to be in that position to hear that. And I don't want to hear from somebody that's sitting across the table like that. So, how you do it is as important as who's doing it and what you're saying.
Yeah, well, the messenger is very important. I could go talk to somebody. They know my background. I'm a Republican. Okay. Whether that matters or not, it does if you're talking to other conservatives. I've served in the legislature. Okay, so I've got some experience with that. But even if I haven't served, everybody on my team, since we're a C3, we're not supposed to say Republicans, we're say conservative. We're conservatives. They know where we come from. We have a very clear statement of what we believe conservative energy principles to be, and it's on our website. So our mission, it's not like a corporate gobbledygook mission, a vision and mission, we're going to save the world and whatever. It's to champion reliable, affordable, clean American energy.
Do you find the clean is like a taboo word now?
People usually alert to that if they're going to alert on anything, and they say, "What do you mean by clean?" And I ask them, "What do you think it is?" And they say, "You're a solar geek or something." I say, "Well, isn't nuclear clean? Aren't batteries clean?" So that's really the first objection to get over. What is clean? And we try and avoid triggering terms.
Yeah. I was about to say, I don't lead with it. It'll come up because I'm just a nerd. And so it's more specific to what I'm talking about. But I just say energy now.
And that's fine.
Yeah. That's what I've found.
I haven't sat on the other side of the desk when people give me the two pagers, like, "Oh, this is interesting." And they're like, "What are your questions?" It's like, first time I've ever met you, I've glanced at this for 10 seconds. I don't have any questions. So, a better way to start a conversation, it's kind of like when you're dating. Like I've been married for a while, but when you're dating, you don't meet the person of your dreams and say, I'm going to marry you in the first 10 seconds that you meet somebody. Or at least I don't know anybody that's ever happened to. You have to have this back and forth, get to know one another and get to
Yeah.
trust one another, which is what we do when we go on. It's like Conservative Energy Network. It's kind of in our name, talking mainly to conservatives. What do you believe
Hmm.
in? This is our mission. We've got a whole list of conservative principles that underlines everything we believe, like don't pick winners and losers.
Right. Free markets.
Yeah, free markets. In theory, everybody loves that until they have somebody they want to, pick a winner.
Right.
Anyway, we like to ask them what they think about energy first to kind of drive out where their notions of things are and
Hmm.
then have a discussion about things. I mean, there's a good friend of mine who's now a U.S. congressman. Went to his office. We were talking about transmission policy. And he had a couple seconds before he had to go to vote on the floor. I said, "John, tell me just one thing." I said, "Yeah, what's that?" He says, "Well, offshore wind really does kill whales, right?" And I said, "No, it doesn't." But then I backed up where that came from and the measures that offshore wind companies use to protect marine mammals. He said, "Well, that's good. I didn't know that." And I said, "And that, my friend, is why I'm here to
Yeah.
make sure you have the facts. Vote however you want, but now you have the facts."
Right. So take me back, when you were getting into all this, where was, young John looking at the military? Like you couldn't have known you'd end up in politics or doing any of these things.
Never know.
I mean, you went to West Point. So, I mean, I'm always impressed with people that go to West Point because you had to have your shit together at an early enough age. I didn't know what I was doing until I was like graduating college. And I'm like, I guess I'll enlist. Oh, you have an OCS spot? I'm aware of what that is because my dad did that in Vietnam. Sure, that sounds like a good idea. But I was 22. Like, you're planning this out at like 14, 15, 16 to go to West Point?
Yeah, pretty much in high school. Yeah.
I could not have accepted that much responsibility for myself. How did you do that?
Um, you're influenced by your family environment. Most of my uncles had fought in one war or another, and I love them all. But looking back, it was one of the defining moments of their lives and the conflicts they engaged in. And so my uncle Roland always used to go to the VFW. And even when I was a little kid, we'd go visit him. "Oh, let's go to the VFW." And of course, he'd drink, and I just sit there and listen to stories. Um, I looked up to him and my other uncles, and my dad had worked in a defense plant, so he was never in the military, but they built tanks and jeeps and all kinds of stuff. So and I'm maybe a year or two older than you, maybe a little bit more. But when I was growing up, the military wasn't necessarily a bad thing. So it was kind of in my head.
I mean, I'll tell you, I wasn't doing planks this morning for leg day like you were. So, I mean, you got that on me. I
I
went for a
was,
short jog, but I wasn't doing planks on top of
uh,
it.
hey, no, it was a leg day at the gym and abs. Trying to do a little bit of abs every workout. So today was
Yeah, keep
planks.
that
But
core
anyway,
going.
so I decided I want to go to West Point. I don't know. I just confluence of factors, blessed enough to be accepted and spent my 4 years. I'm not going to call it 4 wonderful years because anybody who's been a plebe at West Point does not count that as a wonderful year.
Mhm.
And then had a career in the Army. Spent 20 years in, retired as a lieutenant colonel, as an airborne ranger infantry guy. It was a good career.
Yeah. What units were you with?
First unit was out of West Point was a really tough assignment. Went to the 25th Infantry Division, Schofield Barracks
Yeah. Okay. For people who don't know, that's in Hawaii. I
in
mean,
Hawaii.
oh, it's tough.
Yeah, that was tough as a bachelor. A lot of scuba diving,
Mhm.
but it was good to get feet on the ground, essentially as a light infantryman. Served there, up, basic course, advanced course, infantry. Served there. Served in Second Armored Division when there were still was a 2AD at Fort Hood. Spent some time at 5th Mech Division. One was at Fort Polk when there was a 5th Mech Division. For officers, you get the alternate specialty. Mine was operations, research, systems analysis, kind of a geeky way of saying problem solving using computer simulations and higher level mathematics. So the Army sent me to grad school at UT Austin, Buckham Horns.
This is an Aggie show. Can't
Still
do it.
love you if you're from something else. No, I'm sorry. I know that. That's why I had to do that. So I got a master's degree there, had a tour at the Army's recruiting command. I was basically the deputy G3. It's got a different name for it there, but wound up here at Fort Bragg. That was my final assignment. I was in the 18th Airborne Corps and the G3 ship, worked up there. Some deployments here and there to little garden spots and not so garden spots around the world. So
I can imagine. So when you're getting out, what was that process like? I mean, did you start thinking about what you want to do a year or two out, or were you cutting papers and turning in your canteens and
now,
like, oh man, what am I supposed to be doing now?
no, I kind of, well, I was dual military. My wife was an Army nurse and we were getting at 20 and you're looking at, am I going to get promoted? Am I going to get this command? Like, whatever. And it's like, you just kind of know when it is. So I started planning about 6 months out and it's like, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Mhm.
And not that being in the Army is not being grown up, but it's different. And the one thing I decided was because of my background, different jobs I'd had, I could have made, 100, $200 an hour as a contractor getting right out. And it's like, I think I got the Army thing down. I'm pretty green, West Point, ring knocker, boom, boom, infantry guy, airborne, all that good stuff. I want to do something different. I don't want to be just here. So I got out and went through, there's this one book, What Color is Your Parachute? I remember
Yeah.
reading that. I don't know. It's a pretty good book actually, and helped me focus on what I wanted to do. And then I got out and sent resumes everywhere, and nobody wanted me. The guy down the street said, "Hey, John, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, no, I'm just kind of hanging around right now." And long story short, I got in the mortgage business because he was in the mortgage business and found out I liked that. Was hired by one company, advanced pretty rapidly. Figured out what I was doing, then I figured I could do better than the guy who hired me. So I started my own company. Had that for a dozen years or so, and that led to another company, a marketing company. I started that and had a real estate company for a while. All these going on at the same time. So it's just kind of the entrepreneurial life, which was much different than the Army in many respects. And I learned a lot about taxes and forms and government regulations. And yeah, I don't know. God's got a plan. You just got to kind of go with where He wants you to be, but you got to do the work to get there too.
So how did you make that jump from there into I want to just slip my wrists by being a politician? Which is,
Well,
I imagine, how it feels to be a politician. I can't speak from personal experience.
no, not really. There's rewards in it sometimes. I got angry. I got pissed off because with these different companies, one was a LLC, another was a C corp, and the easy thing to do is just give all your paperwork to your accountant and let them tell you how much you're getting back or how much you owe.
Mhm.
And the more complicated companies get, you have to do that. But I always want to know the why of it because, particularly in the mortgage company, we'd close a lot of loans and make a lot of money. I'd pay everybody and pay the operations. And then what I thought I should be getting, I wasn't getting. And I really got interested in why am I paying all this tax? Basically, I got pissed off about the amount of North Carolina federal tax I was paying. And I wanted to run for Congress. And I talked to a guy who's in the state legislature. And he said, are you independently wealthy, a millionaire? I said, no. Says, can you raise $2 million in like the next 90 days? I said, probably not. And he said, you might want to try the state legislature. I said, Yeah, but I really had a problem with the federal government. He said, "Have you looked at the North Carolina income tax?" I said, "Yeah, it kind of sucks too." He said, "Look, just try this." I was pissed off enough. I said, "Okay." I ran the first time, did not win. Ran the second time, I did win.
Wait, so what signal what from the first time was like, ah, next time?
I did good. I came really close to an incumbent who'd been there like 20 years.
Mhm.
I scared the bejesus out of him, and I raised like $90,000.
This was in the primary or the general election?
No, that was in the general. I didn't have a
Okay.
primary. And like you can see my name on the screen, SZOKA. I live in the South. Combination of SZ in any form is not normal in the South. A lot of Smith Jones, the area where I am, a lot of other common names. Soka's not one of them. So, people like sit back like, "You ain't from around here, are you?" I said, "No, I'm not. What was your first clue?" He goes, "Your name ain't from here." So I said, "No, it's not." He said, "Why should I vote for you?" And I went down a list of things. "Do you pay too much in taxes?" Hell yeah. "Does the government too much in your life?" He said, "Hell yeah." I said, "We believe the same thing." I went through a list of about 6 things. I said, "Well, we believe the same thing, so does it really matter how my name's spelled or what accent I might have?" He goes like this, "You're a pretty smart guy. You're right. I'm gonna vote for you." It's like, I don't know about the smart part, but he did vote for me and he worked for me. And it goes back to what I said earlier is that you have to meet people where they are, whether it's a potential spouse you're dating for the first or multiple times,
Mhm.
whether you're talking to an elected official trying to get them to see things your way, whether you're trying to get a voter to vote for you and get into office. I never went into politics to get rich, and it didn't make me rich, unlike some people.
I hear it works out pretty good.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, that Congress thing when you know what's going to happen policy. Anyway, I went to help people in my community, small businessmen primarily. And the more I got into it, it's like people are getting kind of messed over in other ways too. So I was like a fixer. I didn't have an agenda for one thing. While I was there, I got involved in taxes, was involved in tax reform. I got involved in broadband, trying to get broadband because those kids have as much as a right
Mhm.
to participate in the world as somebody who lives in $1 million house. Got involved in energy. I got involved in a lot of things that was all for the betterment, in my view, of people who live not only in my district, but the state. And I guess I kind of caught the bug and stayed there. And then 10 years, it's like, you know what? It's about time I need to do something else and let somebody else take a whack at this because I don't want to be one of these guys that's been around the building 100 years and you're there just because you're there and you're taking up air.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you also had a pretty good time. I mean, I don't
I had a
I don't
great
know if
time.
you can share those, placards you got, but,
Yeah. Mm.
it sounds like you were with some good people that you had to at least, like, enjoy the time that they had.
Yeah, and the ones I showed you earlier, I probably won't share those. There's one up above my head, the old legitimus non carborundum, which I got that early in my career, which is Latin for "Don't let the bastards get you down," which is kind of a good thing to keep close to your heart, no matter what you do for a living.
That's true.
Not everybody's going to like you, whether you're in politics or working for somebody or telling people what to do or being in a volunteer organization. So, need to try and keep focused. And that's one thing of the armed forces. Gives you the ability to focus on things
Mhm.
and really shift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. I mean, that military helped me do that really quickly. I think that's one huge benefit of military service.
So, what do you see as a year from now, if you looked back and saw CN was successful, what do you think you'd be able to put your finger on that you're doing this week that would make it so?
Yeah, that's a tough one. We track a lot of legislation, and right now there's probably 100 different bills at least across the 26 states we work in that we're tracking. And how do we measure success? We measure success one vote, one elected official at a time, one issue at a time. But
Mhm.
if you can take somebody from being hard, no, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of, and we educate them, it's like to maybe, or like, yeah, well, I'm a fan now. I'll give you an example of that is me. When I was first elected to the legislature in 2012, in 2013, somebody came into my office and said, "What do you think about solar energy?" I said, I think it's a bunch of crap. It wouldn't exist without massive government subsidies. That's what I think. And they represent the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. And they said, well, we have a little bit different opinion of that. I go, oh, what's that? And they told me it was interesting. And at the time, Obama was president, and Fort Bragg was in my district. And long story short, on BRACs, there's a lot of different elements that go into a base realignment and closure, who they're going to stand down, who they're going to close. They weren't going to close Fort Bragg or the 82nd, but there's always rumors and those things of taking down one brigade of the 82nd, the chuckleheads who think you don't need airborne forces anymore. And anyway, so energy played into that. And first of all, I knew she was conservative herself, and the message was different. So then Duke Energy, who's our energy company, I asked them what they thought, and they were, so I kind of back and forth and back and forth. And because it affected Fort Bragg in my district, I really got into it. In this like 5-6 month of self-education journey I took.
Mhm.
Must have read a stack of stuff like literally this high, and came to the conclusion that I was wrong, that solar was not a bunch of crap. It was actually a good technology, and it was
Mhm.
probably a good place for it in North Carolina and the rest of the country. So I went from hard skeptic to champion, and then a couple of years, that was in 13, 14. In 2017, I passed a really big bill, House Bill 589, that changed the way solar was brought onto the grid in North Carolina.
Mhm.
That helped North Carolina achieve at the time we're the third most amount of megawatts of solar in the country right now. I think we're the fourth or fifth, but that was good. Killed a really bad bill energy wise. It was trying to gut solar and do other things in 2019, then came back in 2021 and passed another really big bill. So how do you measure success? I mean, I would say that you usually don't get success in dealing with politicians and politics and issues overnight, that sometimes it takes time. With me, I went from skeptic to champion, and then, I've got a history of passing good bills. There's other folks like that throughout the country that we've been able to take from skeptic to maybe not champion, but at least that they're willing to listen to both sides, and their votes might go one day against solar, another day with solar or any other renewable
Yeah.
energy. So it's how do you quantify all that? We track the bills. Some we win, some we lose, some we kill, some we help live.
Right.
And in DC, we worked a considerable amount educating U.S. congressmen and senators on the IRA, the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, but it still had a lot of energy things in there. And even at that level, there was still lack of knowledge on what some of those benefits were from some of the subsidies. Is it well? I mean, it costs money, but every form of energy is subsidized in the country, whether it's a new form of energy or an old form of energy. I mean, so it's the real question isn't do you need a subsidy or not? It's what's the level of subsidy and do you drive an industry off a cliff? Or as they become more mature, do you make the glide down something that industry can handle because it gives them predictability for their business model?
Right. Yeah. I
Y-
mean,
Yeah.
the industry needs more accelerated like depreciation models like oil and gas has. Like we just need a level playing field of energy.
Yeah. All energy subsidized. I want a level playing field for all sources of generation. And energy isn't just generation. You've got the transmission part, you've got the distribution part. Most people like to focus on generation, but transmission is a huge part of the cost of energy. And it's been neglected by and large in this country for the last 40 years. And now, with the ramp up of the amount of electrons we need, you're sending them on the same amount of wires where they need to ramp up the wires too. And there's other technologies where you can get more of the wires you have. But it all, it all fits together. And the basis of a good vote is good knowledge. The people who drive me the craziest are on both sides of the aisle, the ones who think they know everything, they know nothing, and they just get their information from Facebook or wherever they get it. It's just that's probably 10% of all elected officials.
Yeah, no, I see that sometimes when people want to like pat me on the back for working with clean energy, but then like they don't understand it's just energy and infrastructure. Like it is an industrial workforce and an industrial industry. And they're like, "Well, but it's so clean." I'm like, "You ever seen a gearbox break in a wind tower? Dirty, hard work that has to get done." And, like, that doesn't fit their pristine image of what it is, but it's still good and it's still generating electrons. I mean, but it's hard. And
It
hard is
is.
hard to explain.
And I love to take decision makers out to solar facilities and wind facilities and let them go out and look at batteries. Really boring as hell to go look at an array of battery unless you got like 50 of them in a row. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then the question is, well, how to get here? Where the concrete come from to that they're sitting on? Where the rebars
Mhm.
come from? Where do all these cabinets come from? What of all the components? How much wiring is in there? And they start thinking of it not like some abstract thing,
Right.
but as manufacturing, which is what it is.
Right. So, as we kind of close up here, what's your advice for veterans that are looking to get into this space? And I'd also love you to touch on not just like the industry, but like, because we're doing a lot of this advocacy work, I'll get veterans that want to run for office and they always want to run for high office. But I'm actually more interested in veterans that want to run for state office. What is your advice around, veterans, either they've been in the industry or they just want to get into the politics, but they're looking at where they can find their fit, based on your experience?
Most people who successfully get elected have some passion. For me, it was taxes and paying too much for the companies I was running. It's like, this is stupid. The more I talk to other small business people, they had the same opinion. So if your passion is energy, run on that. Anybody can sniff out BS. I mean, seriously, some people can portray BS for a while, but it always gets sniffed out. So if you've got a passion to do something, if you got a passion to help your community, your state, whatever, I mean, follow the passion. Worst thing that can happen is you spend a lot of time, maybe some money, and you don't get elected. It's not easy. I deal with local candidates here in Cumberland County. If they want to be a town councilman or the dog catcher or whatever they want to be, they think because they have 500 friends on Facebook and their 500 friends go, "Oh, yeah, thumbs up, we're going to vote for it." They think they're going to win. They don't do any work. It's
Yeah.
hard work. I mean, when I got elected, even the first time I lost, I knocked on literally thousands of doors. I think the first time I ran was about 4,000 doors. And my district wasn't all like hard packed, all the next together on zero lot line. A lot of it was rural. So I spent months going every day after work, knocking on doors till it got dark, knocking on a door after dark because you can get shot.
I was going to say,
This,
don't open carry.
you got to be very clear about here, but you got to have enough passion to carry you through to do the hard work, to knock on the doors, to give the same campaign speech 10,000 times, but with the same energy that you give it the first time. If you want to help your fellow citizens at whatever level, go out and do it. And I'll put this out there: if somebody's interested, they can notify you, and you can forward me their contact info, and I'll good at giving free advice. There's that getting into the industry. There's lots of different ways to get into the energy industry. Energy isn't just renewables. There's also the other side of it. I will make a comment here. John Szoka's personal opinion is that no matter what's going on right now at the national level, clean energy is not dead. I think maybe we're in a pause. Certainly, we're in a pause on a lot of different issues. The way the current administration is deciding to run the administrative functions of government. Okay. Things do not stay the same way forever. There's a number of court cases on offshore wind, on onshore wind, solar battery. There's cases right now all across the country that I think will be successful, not for the administration, but will push back on some of the administrative and executive actions that have taken place are kind of iffy. And even if they aren't, every president, every administration has their run. We saw with President Biden. I mean, look, I'm not a fan of his. So things go in cycles. The pendulum goes back and forth. I think we're at the extreme end of the pendulum swing. And what I see over the next 2 years, we're going to come back to somewhere, maybe not in the middle, but not at the extreme. So it might be difficult for somebody just getting out of the military right now to say, well, I get in that industry, it's going to get killed. Maybe, but If you look back in history at other industries that have been on rough times, and all of a sudden it comes back with a vengeance, and then the people who have the knowledge and the certificates that go with it, all of a sudden they're in high demand and they're getting paid more than they ever thought they would be. So I'm by nature an optimist.
I talked to the CEO of a very large independent oil company years ago at an A&M function, and he was explaining how he wanted to get into the oil and gas industry during a bust. And I was like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I mean, as much as the solar industry talks about the solar coaster and how like it's up and down, they have no idea what it's like to be in an oil bust. I mean, in Houston, we almost rolled up the sidewalks in the 80s. Still like visceral to my dad and other people that were running businesses back then. But what this guy, David, told me, he's like, listen, I had to work extra hard to try and just find any job. But he's like, everyone's trying to get out of this. There are still jobs, they're still hiring. But once you get in, it's going to come back. Right.
It is.
And when it does, you're so well placed that your personal career just skyrockets so much faster. And he's like, I've seen it with other guys that got in during busts. They always do so much better. So,
And like, I wouldn't say that solar and wind are a bust. They're certainly
no, I wouldn't either.
in a downturn. But I've visited factories that are in this country that are being made. There's a huge one down in Georgia. The footprint of all the buildings is like 32 football fields. They already have a big plant, and this is their new plant where they actually
Mhm.
grow the crystals in these things. And it goes in this automated process, and it slices the crystals in these wafer thin little silicon. It goes through this whole process, and out the other end comes solar panels. And depending on what kind of panel they want, if it's for a rooftop, it's one design, different designs, different purchase orders. It is absolutely freaking amazing. That's not going away. There's other factories that are up there. There's battery factories. I mean, we know as a country, we know that we need more energy. We know we need more electrons. Right now, the idea at the federal level is, well, we don't need solar and wind. Between now and 2030, those are going to be the two biggest sources of additions to generation on the grid. And it's not wishful thinking, it just is. In spite of all the barriers being raised, it's
Yeah.
gonna happen.
Intentional barriers, not happenstance.
Yeah. So, I guess in conclusion to the question is, if somebody's getting out of the military or got out, if you're looking for an industry to get in, even though it's on a rough patch right now, I still think that in the future, in the not too distant future, like your example with getting into oil at the down, I think it's a great time to get into the industry. It's gonna come back, and when it does, it's gonna come roaring back. Whether it's in 26, 27, 28, there's
Yeah.
that. And the other question about politics, if you really want to help your community, state, county, whatever it is, get involved. And if you don't want to run for office, that's fine too. If it's like, well, that's too much for me to do, find those politicians that think mostly like you do, because nobody agrees with everybody else. Some of the votes I took, I really didn't want to take, but I took them anyway. I conflicted. Support that person by knocking on doors for them, supporting them, showing up at rallies, just become a more knowledgeable citizen. And that in itself is huge because the more elected citizens are, you can elect better people and get better policy.
I love that. John, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I really love what you're doing. I love what your organization does. And you're doing a good job with that on the mission you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. Well, hey, you're helping us out too. So thanks for joining
Try.
us today, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Great. Take care.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning into the Project Vanguard podcast. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently, whether it's about an all-the-above energy approach, how energy security is national security, or the veteran workforce in our industry. If you believe what we're building, a quick review goes a long way. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep up the fire.